I got smoke coming from in the cockpit. I think I smell something funny.
Lando Norris is retiring from the Dutch Grand Prix. A huge moment in the World Championship.
How devastating a blow is this for Lando?
It's a blow, it will put him on the back foot, and when you're on the back foot, you tend to take more risks, and if you take more risks, you make mistakes.
This Grand Prix weekend was the perfect example of how Oscar Piastri has improved.
I must admit, I started to have small doubts about him after last season, being this kind of championship-worthy driver. I didn't know if he had it, and then this season, he surprised me in a very positive way.
Isaac Hadjar, you are P3.
Oh my god, mate! What have you done?
It was just a masterpiece of driving. He's blown me away.
Lewis Hamilton is off the road and out of the race.
He's trying to overthink his driving style. You know, it reminds me a little bit of Daniel Ricciardo.
A new driver, the home hero and the championship leader ended up standing on the podium, while some big names found themselves sitting in the sand at the side of the track. Welcome everyone to Zandvoort. It's F1 Nation's review of the Dutch Grand Prix with me, Tom Clarkson. And making his F1 Nation debut is Marcin Budkowski, who has an impressive F1 CV, I must say. Most recently part of the senior management at Alpine, but you've been an aerodynamicist at Prost, at Ferrari, at McLaren, and I'm delighted to have you with us on the show this evening, Marcin. Just tell me first of all what your reaction is after such a dramatic Dutch Grand Prix.
Well, thanks Tom for having me. It was a good race to watch. Certainly lots happened, not only in the race but in the championship as a result. I'm happy to see Oscar on top of the podium. I have a little sweet spot for him because he's been part of our young driver program at Renault and Alpine. So I've seen him grow through F3 and F2 especially, and I think he's a great guy. He's a great driver, but he's a very interesting personality as well. So I'm very happy to see him on top of the podium, and I think it was really refreshing to see Isaac there as well. He's really impressed me this year. I think he's really the beginner that made the strongest impression on me. It's probably the one that we expected the least, to be honest. There was a lot of talk about the other ones and maybe not about Hadjar, and now the talk is about Hadjar, and I think he deserves it.
Well, particularly after Melbourne and that sort of false start he had crashing at the opening race. But let's get into this Piastri, Norris, McLaren situation. Oscar converted pole into his 7th win of the season as Lando Norris retired from the race with a mechanical problem in the closing stages when he was running P2. Had they finished as they were running, Oscar's lead at the top would be 16 points. It's now more than double that at 34 points with just 9 races and 3 F1 sprints to go. It's rare to see a retirement like that these days, isn't it, Marcin? How devastating a blow is this for Lando?
I mean, it's massive because the fight for the championship is extremely close. We've seen, I wouldn't say periods of dominance of both drivers because it's been extremely close, but we had periods, a few races in a row where Lando was scoring more points. Before that, it was Oscar, but it's always going to be very close until the end of the season, especially with McLaren's approach to racing, which is great for us. You know, they let them race, and that ensures a better show for us. But it was always going to be close, and now suddenly that gap is growing, and to a point at a fairly late stage in the season, it will take Lando a lot of efforts and a lot of wins to recover that, unless something happens to Oscar. Because even if Lando goes and wins most of the remaining races, there will be Oscar will be there on the podium, most likely in second place, given how McLaren has a dominant car at the moment. So it is a blow. It's not the end of it, but it's a blow. It will put him on the back foot, and when you're on the back foot, you tend to take more risks because you want to recover some points. And if you take more risks, you make mistakes. And with all due respect to Lando, who's an incredible driver, we've seen quite a few mistakes from him already this season. So is that going to make him more prone to more mistakes? That's the question.
And equally for Oscar Piastri, is 34 points enough for him to start playing the percentage game, not taking the risks, managing the gap, Alain Prost-like?
You know what goes first? What goes through the head of a driver first? it could be my engine at the next race. It's like, obviously Oscar is very happy to get these points, but now he knows there's a potential weakness in the engines he's going to be running until the end of the season. So in the back of his head, it's not like I'm comfortable now. He's like, I'm going to want to have as big a gap as possible, because it could be me at the next race, stopping on the side of a track with smoke in the cockpit.
Yeah, and we have seen some Mercedes reliability problems elsewhere on the grid. This is the first one for McLaren, but we've seen Aston Martin suffer from it. The Works team have suffered as well. I mean, I suppose, just to extrapolate further, because Oscar must be thinking it could be me next time, he has to just push flat out, right?
I think he just has to focus on his season, and that's what he's been really good at so far. He's been focusing on himself. He's been just delivering the best performance he could. He seems, annoyed but unwavered at the different circumstances that I wouldn't say robbed him of a win, because that's not fair. But in Silverstone, in Budapest, he could have reasonably pretended to win the races, and it doesn't seem to be too fazed by that. And I think that's what he needs to continue doing. Just do his job, do his season, qualify as high as he can, make the best race results, and that's the best chance he has to win it. If he starts to overthink it, which may be the case for Lando, then that's when you start to have doubts, that's when you start to question your setup. That's when you start to look at the other side of the garage a little bit too much. What is the other guy doing in terms of setup? Why is it on a different strategy? And then that sends you in a bit of a spin. The best thing is be in your bubble, do the best you can, and score the points. And at the end of the season, that's the strategy that is most likely to win it for you.
Tell us a little bit more about Oscar. I felt that this Grand Prix weekend was the perfect example of how Oscar Piastri has improved. Here last year, he was half a second off Lando Norris in qualifying. He finishes P4. This year, he beats him to pole and controls the race from the front. Have you been surprised by the step he's taken over last winter?
I regret I didn't put a bet on Oscar winning the championship at the beginning of the year. But I didn't for a reason. I must admit, I started to have small doubts about him after last season. Not about his quality as driver. I think he's an amazing driver, and you want a guy like Oscar on a team. But his progression was very good at the beginning. But he got to the stage last year where, it felt like he could be as good as Lando in some races and a bit worse at other races. But it felt like he, that last step of being this kind of championship-worthy driver, I didn't know if he had it in him. And I thought, okay, maybe the guy is just very quick, but it's just not like championship material. And we've seen a lot of drivers like that who are, very, very good, and you want them in your team, but, that's not quite enough to win it. And then this season, he surprised me in a very positive way. I think he's worked a lot on himself during the winter. And he came back as what is undoubtedly championship material, and probably the perfect type of driver that is quick, that is intelligent, that is unemotional, and that is just ruthless in his overtaking maneuvers as well. And I think this weekend also is a good example of that. He was behind Lando for all the practice sessions, and you would clearly see that some corners he would struggle a little bit compared to Lando. And Oscar spent the whole, Friday and Saturday morning looking through the data, looking through on the onboards, understanding where he was losing to Lando, understanding where he could improve on the corners that he was already quicker, and built up towards qualifying. And then in qualifying, there was nothing between them. Actually, when you look at the lap, and I'm sure you did, you see that they come out of the last corner, Lando has a few corners, takes a few corners better. Oscar is a bit quicker here, makes a small mistakes in the exit. They actually come out of the last corner exactly in the same pace. Had he finished his lap normally, he would have been the same time and maybe 1,000 difference. The difference is he caught a small toe from a racing bull, and that gave him the 100th of a second difference. But these guys ended up basically at the same exact level in qualifying, while Oscar was trailing by a quarter of a second most of the weekend. So he, just being clever, just not panicking, just looking at the data and working, he managed to make that disadvantage up, and then executed perfectly in the race.
Has he always been this icy cool character? Let's wind the clock back to when he was part of the Renault driver development program under you. Was he that guy? And what did you see in him back then?
I just remember, I wasn't, obviously I didn't know the Oscar that he's today, because he's evolved and he's grown as a driver and as a young man. But I just remember this. We took on board this driver who was very, very quick and had really good results. And I just I remember the difference between seeing him in the hospitality or outside of the car, and he's just a kid, he looked like a really, really like a kid. He still looks like a kid in some aspects, but he was really nice, a little bit shy, very polite, very well behaved, very well educated. And then he put his helmet on, and he was this ruthless driver who was, extremely quick, but extremely ruthless on the track, very, very aggressive and pulling incredible maneuvers. And then he would remove his helmet, and he would be that shy kid. And I almost thought, is this really him driving the car? Is it have someone put the stick in there or something? Or, because it just didn't feel, it was surreal to see this difference. And I think he's built on that. He's still this quick, aggressive driver, but he's added a lot more, and he approaches his weekends in a very clever way. And because he's strong mentally, he doesn't let himself be put off by a mistake, a defeat, a worse performance. He's just approaching it as this until qualifying the race. That's all what counts.
When you look back, do you think he was a driver that was always made for the big stage? His personality suits this environment in Formula One?
No, I don't think so. I don't. You see all these characters coming into Formula One. Some stronger than others, but they all seem to, to have this utter belief in themselves that they are the best, and almost this ego. This is part of being a race driver or a top athlete. And Oscar just seemed like a nice boy. And but the difference is there's a different Oscar in the car and out of it. I think he's learned a lot over the last few years. He's also lucky that he was put in an environment which is fairly healthy. The McLaren team, the way it's run at the moment, it's a healthy environment. The way they manage the drivers, and I think that's helped him grow. Had he been in a different environment, maybe less healthy, maybe that would have compromised that development.
What do you mean by a healthy environment? Is it just an open environment, open and honest? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, open and honest. I think the way Zach and Andrea and Andreas before that managed the drivers is good. Let's face it. We see this facade, and everything's great, and the strategies are for the sake of the team, and the drivers put a happy face, smile to the cameras, and say the team is winning. That's great. But internally, they're competitors. They also have an entourage. They have, a family. They have a manager. They have people looking after them. These people. There is some tension in the background because of the season, of that rivalry. But so far, Andrea and Zach have managed to keep that under covers, and the atmosphere is healthy. So it feels like there's no mind games, politics behind the scenes. Rivalry that could. Get out of the cockpit and transfer to the garage, to the team of mechanics, of engineers, and etc. I've seen that many times in the past. We've seen that in Formula One many times, and I think that's toxic. And especially if you're a young driver, if you take these habits at the beginning of your career, it might make you a little bit too obsessed about what's going on the other side of the garage.
When you have a technical DNF, as Lando Norris suffered in this Grand Prix, how does it affect the team itself, the intra-team dynamic? Is there a feeling of guilt that you've kind of let one of the guys down, one of the drivers down?
Look, it's motorsport. It happens, you mentioned the level of durability now is much better, and it happens less often, but it happens. It's part of the game. The difference is it used to happen all the time. In the 80s, drivers would finish half of the races, and now it happens, once or twice a season, and that's painful because it feels like it's very unfair. From a team point of view, obviously I don't know the circumstances of this. I heard someone mention that maybe he was following a little bit too closely, or etc. Honestly, I don't think that's the case. The team would have caught that earlier. So I don't think it's a feeling of guilt, but let's face it, there's a team there of, tens of people and hundreds of people here at trackside and 1,000 people plus at the factory. these people are mostly motivated by the Constructors' Championship, and they want to see a 1-2 on the podium. And at the end of the day, who's in front and who's behind, for the team, they're happy to see a 1-2. So I'm sure they have a mixed feeling now. But it doesn't change the fact that they're going for the Constructors' Championship and they're going for the Drivers' Championship, and that should make them happy. It starts to be a problem when you feel like one of the drivers is being favored of the other, and that's when it starts to get out of control, if you want. And I don't think that's the case.
Now, of Oscar's 7 wins this season, was this the best, just given where he started relative to his teammate to where he finished?
I think there was a very impressive management of his weekend. Yes, definitely. And again, the race, he executed perfectly. He felt like he was completely under control. I don't know if he was his best, but these kind of victories and these kind of weekends show how strong he is as a driver, mentally and in terms of execution. And I think that's really what's making the difference in his championship. I don't think it's the DNF that will get us talking at the end of the year if Oscar wins it. I don't think we'll say he won it because of the DNF. I think we'll say he won it because he executed it so well all through the season.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. In Formula One, trust between the team and the driver is paramount, and business isn't so different. Whether you're a startup founder facing your first audit, or a seasoned security lead scaling your GRC program, proving your commitment to security has never been more critical or more complex. And that's where Vanta can help you get compliant fast and stay that way, thanks to its industry-leading AI, automation, and continuous monitoring. With Vanta, you can automate compliance across more than 35 frameworks, including SOC 2, ISO 27001, and HIPAA, fly through security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and let it all run quietly in the background while you focus on growing your business. And the best part, Vanta scales right alongside you. I love how Vanta helps companies of all sizes save time and money. In fact, according to a recent IDC study, Vanta customers save over $500,000 a year in costs and are 3 times more productive. Because establishing trust isn't optional. That's why Vanta makes it automatic. Visit vanta.com/nation to sign up for a free demo today. That's vanta.com/nation.
What a sentence this is! Isaac Hadjar, you are P3! And he started his Formula One career in the barriers on the formation lap. Race 15, he is heading to the podium.
Oh my god, mate! What have you done? Oh! So yeah, that's my first podium in F1. That's it.
Isaac, many congratulations on the first podium in Formula One. Can you start by giving us your emotions on what is a huge day in your career?
Outstanding day. I did not expect that waking up this morning. I was being, very realistic. I knew there was George behind me and both Ferraris. I also didn't run on Friday, any long run, so I didn't have a clue really. So yeah, to cross the line third is just, unreal.
Now, we had a debate on our Dutch Grand Prix preview show about who the Rookie of the Year was. It was a close run thing between Gabriel Bortoleto and Isaac Hadjar. I'm guessing Isaac, who's walking past us now actually, we're in the Red Bull Moto, he's stolen that mantle now, but what's your thoughts on the job that he's done, not only today but this year? He's
blown me away, to be honest. I've been really, really impressed with him. I didn't really see that much potential in him before when in F2 and F3, and that's probably because I haven't followed him close enough. I was having a chat with Helmut earlier during the year because I manage some young drivers, and so sometimes I have chats with people from teams to try to get them in a young driver program or things like this. So I catch up regularly with Helmut about it. And I was telling him that I was impressed with Isaac, and Helmut said, well, I've always believed in him, and I thought he was great, and he maybe didn't have the best chances in F2 to show all his class. But but it's been really impressive. He's like this kid is like Teflon. You know, he doesn't seem to react to pressure. And again, I was talking to someone from Racing Bulls earlier this year who told me that he still feels like it's a game for him. You know, like the car is great, super fun to drive. I'm driving with great drivers. I'm super excited. I'm happy, and it didn't feel like the pressure of being in Formula One kind of got to him, and it still doesn't feel like that. It feels like he's just enjoying what he's doing. So he's very talented, and he's there and having fun, and as a result of that, he's not destabilized. He's just he's just driving to the best of his abilities. I'm very impressed with him. I think Bortoletto has been very impressive recently in qualifying, especially, and he has Hulkenberg as a reference, which is a solid reference. I've worked with Nico, and I really rate him as a driver. But Isaac in this car is doing things that you didn't expect this car was capable of.
But how hard is it to spend 72 laps with either George Russell or one of the Ferraris on your gearbox, and at least as far as I can make out from the TV coverage, not make a single mistake?
Yes, definitely. And in some safety car restarts, that's the sort of opportunity for more experienced drivers to play and trick in you. I think that's one of the restarts where he was a little bit late on the throttle, but he managed to defend. Wow, it's I think it's super impressive. And at the time when he got the third place, you could think as well that the pressure would increase. He had was it Russell, I think, on his heels. And no, he just brought it home. So yeah, very impressed.
As you say, very unemotional. In the press conference afterwards, I thought we might not. I wasn't expecting tears, but I was expecting some kind of emotion. But he was just very controlled. This is what I always dreamed of. I'm now delivering. It was as if there was an inevitability about it in his mind, and this is the sort of first step. Next, it's going to be winning races, and then after that, it's going to be winning championships. And to that end, Marcin, what do you do with a driver like Isaac Hadjar now? I mean, Helmut Marko has a notorious reputation of putting too much pressure on these guys, promoting them too soon to that second seat at Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen. What would you do with Isaac next year?
So it's a very good question. The first point is, what is this podium going to do to Isaac? Is it going to make him realize he's in Formula One because he's going to get so much more attention? And is it going to make him an even better driver because it's going to give him that confidence that he can achieve podiums and maybe more? Or is it going to actually make him realize he's in Formula One? There's a lot of expectation on him. So that's always a key. The first podium, the first victory can be very beneficial or actually a little bit detrimental to the psyche of a driver. So it's going to be interesting to see that.
And what is your prediction, knowing his character a little bit?
Based on what I said, it should do nothing. It should be like, this is
He'll
getting...
kick on from here,
This is is getting even more fun. I want more of that champagne. I want more of these trophies. But let's see. I think it shouldn't faze him, but we never know. The other question is, what's next? Red Bull is in a tricky situation. If Max leaves, whether it's in a year or in 2 or in 3, who's the next driver they're going to bet on? And obviously, they can go and get a Russell, they can go and try to get a Leclerc or a Piastri from another team. It's going to be difficult, it's going to be expensive, it's an uncertain outcome. Or should they invest in one of the drivers they've already invested in? Yuki Tsunoda, Liam Lawson, you can say they've been there, they had the chance, and they're probably not looking like the prospect, the driver that Red Bull want to build on. So logically, it should be Hadjar. It could be Lindblad, but it's still in Formula 2. It's still a bit early. So what's the best way to prepare Hadjar? Is it to put him at Red Bull with Max, with the risk of Max destroying him or him getting destabilized and losing confidence because of that drive, that Red Bull car that's so peaky and so difficult to drive? Or is it keeping him at Racing Bulls for another year?
What would you do?
The question is, what would Helmut do? Because at the end of the day, Helmut's not going to listen to my opinion, or he might listen, but he's not going to do anything with it.
I think Oscar Piastri is a good case study here because it's taken him until year 3 to really peak in Formula One.
Yeah.
This is Isaac's first year, which means I think he'll still have a lot to learn in year 2. He won't be ready. He won't beat Max Verstappen next year.
Look at Kimi and the season, Kimi Antonelli, and the difficult season he's having. This race is a very good illustration of that. I think he would have benefited Kimi to do a year or two in a smaller team. Obviously, circumstances of Lewis leaving accelerated this. It's probably the same for Isaac Hadjar. As for him as a driver, it would be better to do another season at Racing Bulls. But equally, I know Helmut's mentality, and Helmut's mentality is throw him in the water and see if he can swim. So I think the best for him would be to leave him here for another season.
And put who alongside Max next year? Keep Yuki Tsunoda?
That's a very good question. I think so. Although, the question is, can Yuki progress enough? And the reality is that car seems so picky and so difficult to drive that you could put anyone in there, and you would achieve the same result. So there's a big regulation overhaul for next year. There's no more Adrian Newey. There's Laurent Mekies has also a background as engineer, and I'm sure he's putting some of his experience in the direction of the car development. I think, to be honest, if that car is a bit less peaky and a bit more, I wouldn't say easy to drive, because easy to drive cars are not fast, but possible to drive for someone who's not an alien like Max Verstappen with his car control. I mean, this turn 2, in the first lap.
Save.
I mean, if it was any other driver than Max, would have been embarrassed. Let's face it, no one else could have put that, outside move and that car control. He's just able, and that's the characteristic of a lot of the very, very good drivers I worked with. They love extremely peaky front, very, very forward balance, a very, very aggressive front end, very oversteery cars, and then they can control the rear in a way that nobody else can. And Max is just another level of that. So I think the reality is, if they have a car that is a bit more drivable next year, I'm sure Yuki will be, a couple of tenths from Max.
But do you think cars retain their inherent DNA through a regulation change?
Yes, they do, because they're just a story of their development through the years, but they're also the result of what a group of engineers has learned over the years, and how they've set up their tools, how they set up their simulator, how they set up all their simulation, to develop a car. Yes, it's likely to influence that car, but I think they're conscious of the problem. Let's face it, if Max was to leave Red Bull at the end of this season, the 2 cars they would have with whoever drives them would probably be, if the regulations were stable, or if Max broke a leg today, they would probably qualify at the edge of between Q3 and in Q2, in the middle of the grid. So Red Bull are conscious they have a problem, because they're not going to win any Constructors' Championship with a car like that, and the day Max leaves, they're in big trouble.
Well, and the stats prove it. Max Verstappen has 205 points this season. Red Bull Racing 214.
Yeah. It's brutal. So you can't rely on one driver or one person like that. You can't rely on an Adrian Newey, as in, if Adrian is not there, that the team is collapsing. You can't rely in the same way on one driver, because obviously he can leave, he can break a leg tomorrow, and then what?
So in conclusion, on Isaac Hadjar, you believe he's the real deal and needs to be looked after by Red Bull. Give him another year at Racing Bulls.
I think that's the reasonable decision to make, and keep Yuki as a baseline for the new generation of cars, and see whether that car is more drivable and whether he can get closer to Max. I'm not sure that's what Helmut and Laurent will do. But also, let's not forget that Red Bull's never been shy of changing drivers in the season, so they could very well start with Yuki for 4 or 5 races, and they decide to put Isaac in there. I think that would be the worst for Isaac, to be honest, because then you don't have all the winter of preparation with the new team, with the new set of engineers, and etc. But hey, we've seen so many things with the guys at Red Bull that I wouldn't exclude that.
This is a paid advertisement by BetterHelp. Have you ever noticed that when it comes to things like car trouble, health issues, or home improvements, basically anything practical, We'll happily turn to professionals for advice. But when it comes to our own well-being and mental health, we're far more likely to just wing it. We'll chat to a friend, scroll through a few self-care posts, maybe even convince ourselves that a lie-in at the weekend will fix everything. But the truth is, sometimes what we really need is proper support. And if you're dealing with anxiety, depression, or even just struggling to find a sense of purpose, the support of a BetterHelp therapist could be exactly what you need to move forward. And what's great is BetterHelp is entirely online, so you can take your sessions whenever and wherever you're most comfortable. Just fill out a short questionnaire and you'll be matched with a qualified professional who fits your needs. With over 5 million people supported to date globally, BetterHelp is now available in the UK with thousands of therapists that have expertise in a wide range of specialities. With a 4.9 out of 5 rating based on over 1.7 million client reviews, BetterHelp makes counselling affordable and convenient, and you can switch therapists anytime for no costs. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/F1Nation. That's betterhelp.com/F1Nation. There's more to come from Zandvoort in a moment, but I just wanted to let you know about the other official F1 podcasts you can listen to this week. My guest on F1 Beyond the Grid is Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur. I spoke to him a little earlier in the weekend here at Zandvoort. He was absolutely fascinating. That is out on Wednesday, and you can watch our chat on the F1 YouTube channel as well. And this week's F1 Explains is all about the history of Ferrari and what makes them such a unique and iconic team in Formula One. That's out on Friday. Just search for F1 Beyond the Grid and F1 Explains on your podcast app.
Antonelli's tyres are up to the working range. Oh, he hits him! Kimi Antonelli into the side of Charles Leclerc. The Mercedes and the Ferrari make contact. Antonelli knew he had one opportunity to take the place, and he spins Charles Leclerc into the barriers.
We've talked about Kimi Antonelli a little bit already on the pod. The collision between Charles Leclerc and Kimi during this Grand Prix. Do you think that was another example of the growing pains that Kimi's going through? Would you apportion blame on him for that accident?
I would, definitely. I think, however, that he was right to try it. He was out of the pits with Charles on cold tires, and he had to make a move. He didn't manage to make the move in turn 1. He was too far. Turn 3, you can take different trajectories. He tried. He overcooked a little bit because he understood, you can take different trajectories in this corner, but the exit of the corner is the same. So there was no room for two cars. And I think had he controlled the car, had he not carried that much speed, he would have avoided that crash. I think I've seen it. It was a few years ago. I think Fernando pulled a move like this in turn 3. So it's doable. I think if it was just one mistake, like this, he just tried and overcooked it. Anyone could have made this mistake. It's just the accumulation in the case of Kimi that starts to be a little bit problematic, and it just shows that there's a little bit too much pressure, or he's trying a little bit too hard. And when a driver tries too hard, overdrives the car, normally it results in worse lap times and in worse performance, or tries a bit too hard in a race that results in mistakes. And I think for Kimi, the right thing to do would be to have a reset, and just say, forget all expectations. I am where I am, and it doesn't matter if I'm a few tenths of George in qualifying or if I'm a few positions behind a race. I just need to look at myself and learn and build. But is it Mercedes? The pressure is huge.
Toto said in the press conference on Friday here at Zandvoort that he almost held his hand up and said, yes, I think we have put too much pressure on him. Go back to giving him his FP1 debut at Monza of all places last year. And of course, actually, he tried too hard. He put it in the wall at Parabolica. You say try a reset, but it's very difficult to reset in that environment, isn't it? You can tell him as much as you like that there's no pressure on you, but he's in a Mercedes. He's putting pressure on himself. Where do you go from there?
It's awfully difficult. I completely agree with you. There's no magic formula. They just had a summer break. Clearly, that wasn't enough of a reset. It's just let go of the expectations. We're talking about Isaac and the fact that he's enjoying driving the car and he's having fun. I'm not sure Kimi is having fun at the moment. and a driver needs to have fun. So if I was in Toto's
Why
shoes,
does a driver need to have fun? Because it comes more naturally behind the wheel, and
I think so. You need to, first of all, it's, let's not forget why they're here. They're here because they love driving cars fast, and then the results is just the accomplishment of driving a car fast, and they're competitive. But if you get to a place where you get into the car and you don't think about the enjoyment of it at all, but you just think about doing everything perfectly and making everybody happy and the pressure and etc., I don't think that helps you as a driver to show your talent. And I think if I was Toto, and I have a huge respect for Toto as a team principal and as a manager, and as I think he's a very emotionally intelligent person as well. So I'm sure he's had this kind of discussion. But if I was leading that team, I would sit down with Kimi and say, you know what? Let's forget about the points, the Constructor Championship, the results, and etc. From Monza onwards, just have fun in the car. Just try to just enjoy what you're doing. Forget any expectations, and just get back to the roots of you're driving a Formula One car. It's the coolest car to drive in the world. It's a competitive car. Just go and have fun and get some good racing and forgo all expectations.
talking of resets, I think this segues quite nicely into Lewis Hamilton. He went into the break after a very frustrating race in Hungary. He came back and was happy after qualifying, having got into Q3. We then see a very uncharacteristic mistake at turn 3. Just a weekend to forget for Ferrari, both drivers going out of that corner. What do you make of Lewis Hamilton's plight at Ferrari at the moment? Do you think he's putting too much pressure on himself? Which seems a strange thing to say for a guy who's won 7 World Championships and more than 100 Grand Prix.
I think he's not satisfied with his own performance, and respect to Lewis for admitting this and just being open to the press and just saying I'm not happy with the way I am. I'm not happy with the way I'm driving, and I need to do better. It's difficult to change cars and teams after such a long and successful career. I think he still has the appetite for it. But is he, enough, mentally flexible enough? Is his brain elastic enough, as we say in neurosurgery, when you have kids learning very quickly at a very young age because their brain is just like adapts to everything. It's a difficult one. It's just like he gave himself this challenge because he dreamt about it, and that's not exactly going to plan. And I'm sure it's more like frustration rather than pressure he's putting himself. He's just not happy with where he's at, and he's trying. And it reminds me a little bit of Daniel Ricciardo, who I've worked with at Renault, and I've always had a very good relationship with. And he was really quick at Renault. He has a lot of talent. And seeing his misery at McLaren was painful. And then at his return in Racing Bulls. And there's a point where you overthink everything. We're talking about having fun or being more natural. There's a point where you start to overthink every corner entry, every corner exit. That car, the McLaren, wasn't adapted to Daniel's driving style for some reason. And he tried so hard to change his driving style to adapt it to the car after trying to set up the car differently, and it didn't work, that he actually, lost his mojo, his driving style. And he just couldn't drive naturally. And when he came back to a car that was different again, it was the AlphaTauri or whatever it's called that year. He just couldn't get his driving back because he was overthinking everything. And I think in Lewis's case, he is still adapting to that Ferrari. He can't quite get the maximum out of it as Charles is capable of doing on a regular basis. And he starts to think, what should I do differently? And this, we're talking about Lewis Hamilton. He's been here in F1 for like 20 years, pretty soon. And he's trying to overthink his driving style, and I think that's it's the beginning of that bad spiral. But equally, he has to, because otherwise it doesn't exactly perform the way he wants. And I think that's where he's at. He's a little bit at loss of it, and sometimes he manages to get it right, and sometimes he doesn't.
You've worked at Ferrari. You've worked for British-based teams as well. Fred Vasseur has said already this year that perhaps both him and Lewis underestimated the change of going to Ferrari for someone like him. How different is it down there in Maranello?
Look, I worked there many years ago. I left myself in 2007, so I'm sure...
You were there during the dominant Schumacher years, right?
I was there with Michael. There was, Jean Todt was heading the team. Stefano Domenicali was the sporting director. Ross Brawn was the technical director. Mattia Binotto was there. James Allison was there. It was like a bit of the dream team of Formula 1. Nick Tombazis was my boss, actually. There's a lot of familiar faces in the F1 paddock today. The pressure is huge from the Italian press and from the Italian society in general. I don't think Lewis cares about that. I've worked with Lewis a little bit at McLaren many years ago, but I don't know him for who he is now. He's obviously very, very has evolved a lot. I worked with him in his first years in Formula 1. I don't think he's at the stage where what the Corriere della Sera writes about him is keeping him awake at night. I think it's just more he wants this to be a success. He wants this to be the culmination of his career. It's more difficult than everybody expected, and I think the frustration is growing on his side and probably on the team side as well.
But what about the processes, the language barrier? Ferrari is now the only team on the grid that doesn't have a base of sorts in the UK, with Sauber, of course, now having their technical office near Bicester. Are you and I underestimating the change that he's gone through?
I don't think the Italian side of it has so much to do with it. It's every team has slightly different ways of working, different processes. I mean, the Italian way of working is a little bit less organized and a bit more creative, let's put it this. However, when I was there, and it was a different era, the internal politics and the stuff like that, Ross wouldn't allow this to happen in a technical team, and that was one of Ross's strengths. He cut all the blame game and just said, we're a team, we're working together. It doesn't matter who made a mistake or whose fault it is. Let's solve the issues. What is the atmosphere there now? I have no idea. But I think it's really more, the car's different, the processes are different, the methods of working are different. And for Lewis, it's a different beast. He was already struggling a little bit at Mercedes last year. He was slower than George in most qualifying sessions. He never really adapted to this new generation of cars. I think he's going to wait for next year to see the new generation of cars and see if that suits his driving style. And I think honestly, if it remains as it is now, then probably the most logical thing is for both sides to say, we tried. It was we gave it a good shot. We enjoyed working together, and it's best to stop there. I don't think Lewis is going to want to stay for forever if he is struggling and not winning races. He wants to win with Ferrari. Either he will believe that he can win with Ferrari, or he will probably go.
And a lot will rest on how the car comes out of the box at the beginning of next year with the new regulation cycle.
Definitely, but I think Charles is getting frustrated as well. Not for he's making the most of the car and of the team, but he wants victories. He wants championships, and he knows that the year are passing by. From what I know, it's all smiles and we're together and we work together in the outside world. But he must be thinking in his head, is this the team I wanna invest in? He's so emotionally invested at Ferrari. Charles is he's a Ferrari kid. He's grown with Ferrari. He wants to be at Ferrari. He wants to win with Ferrari. But there will come a time where he will ask himself, do I want to continue in this and potentially never win a championship, or will I want to move?
Marcin, this has been such a fascinating chat. I could talk to you all day. We haven't got time. I know you've got to shoot. So I just wanted to ask you about some great recovery drives. Which of these impressed you the most? Alex Albon going from P15 on the grid to P5 at the flag. Haas duo, Ollie Behrman and Esteban Ocon. Great recoveries as well to P6 and P10 respectively. Or Lance Stroll fighting his way through to P7. Which of those stood out for you the most?
I think the Williams weekend's been a weekend of ups and downs.
Sure.
As the Aston Martin one, I think a lot of these kind of swings were also related to the last safety car and the circumstance of that. It's difficult really. They all like inside stories, and I would have to go through all the data. But certainly, you know, Albon I think he's a very, very talented driver. He impressed me a lot, especially since he moved to Williams. I think he has a lot of speed in him. I think again he was probably the one at Red Bull that fared the best, to be honest, of all the guys who went there and got kicked out. And I think Sainz also is finding, you know, a driver next to him in the garage is you know, giving him a little bit of you know, sweat to match. So in general, I think Alex is driving extremely well, and he's, you know, pulling results sometimes out of races where you don't think he will get there.
And a great start today to go from P15 to P10 on lap 1. I feel his stock has risen this year, his performances against Carlos. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. I think you know, there's always been a doubt whether his teammates were up to scratch, and Carlos, let's remember, it was winning races at Ferrari and challenging, you know, Charles Leclerc. So definitely his stock has risen. He's an interesting one to watch, actually. I think he's very invested in the Williams project, and he believes in it. But you know, he might get opportunities as well. I'm not quite sure what his contractual situation is. I think he's committed to Williams for a bit, but I think he's one of these young, not that young anymore. He's been around for a few years, but I think he's one of these drivers who, if you put him in the right car, in the right team, he can go and get you know, victories and potentially fight for a championship.
Marcin, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great to chat. If we can just end it what I call the traditional way, I want to know who your driver of the day is.
Oh, it's got to be Hadjar, isn't it? I mean, you can't fault Piastri for, you know, Oscar for the race he did, but Hadjar, you know, qualifying P4 and bringing it home in a car that, you know, had less race pace than the cars around him. It was just a masterpiece of driving for, you know, an underdog or like a guy in a weaker car, just defending and just executing to perfection. So it has to be Zach Hadjar.
Well, I have to agree as well. He is my driver of the day. Oscar Piastri, brilliant, but you have to give it to Isaac. Look, one final news thing. There are reports going around the paddock here in Zandvoort that you might be going to Cadillac.
Well, that's news to me as well.
Okay, all right, okay. Look, Marcin, thank you so much for coming on the show. Great to chat.
Thank you.
For more reaction and analysis from Zandvoort, go to Formula1.com or the official F1 app, or at F1 on social media. And you can also watch the race highlights on the F1 YouTube channel. We will of course be back on Thursday with our preview of the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Can you believe it's the last European race of the season? Thanks very much for listening. F1 Nation is produced by Formula 1 and Audio Boom Studios.